I'm like in the group chat and you're saying that to me. Like, I hope we just run over all these Trump supporters.
And this all came just because you said you weren't going to vote for Biden or Bernie.
I'm not a registered Democrat.
Control over what?
I had communist manifestos chucked at my head. There was so much political unrest, obviously, through COVID, and we're getting into the midterms, just past the midterms, and George Floyd and BLM. And I never intended to make a political statement. I just kind of realized that things were... There wasn't as much love and tolerance as I thought there was. And I knew that most of my friends thought differently than I did. I was in a very liberal industry. I was still acting when I was at UCLA. And I knew, people would walk around with their I'm with her pins. I had really good friends, during 2016 election that literally had, like, I'm with her painted on their nails and all this stuff. So I knew that I had different opinions, but I just never brought it up. I didn't think that it was for a workplace. I was also very young. I didn't vote in the 2016 election. And I think it was still kind of... I knew what my values were, what my principles were, but I didn't really understand how that translated to politics and current events, and I kind of had to learn that, and it came to a head in 2020. And, I literally did nothing other than saying, I'm not a registered Democrat.
That's what you said?
Yeah, and I'm not voting for Bernie or Biden in the midterms. And there was already some unrest because one of my best friends at the time, my big in my sorority actually, she was voting for Biden because Bernie was too extreme for her. She even got flack. Like, how could you do that? He's like some establishment politician. He's a shill, all of this stuff. So she got a ton of hate. And then I come in here. Then it's like, yeah, I'm not voting for either of them. And things started to change then, and it wasn't like you're canceled, we hate you, but it was a lot of vitriol, a lot of questioning. I had communist manifestos chucked at my head. I walked into a party, literally had one, hey Brett, like, fucking read this. Literally thrown at me when I walked into a party. People knew that, I had family from the South, my dad's whole family, like, going back in our lineage, like, I could be like a Daughters of the Revolution. I have a, direct line back to a Revolutionary soldier, deep, deep roots in the South, in North Carolina. And my grandmother was raised on a tobacco farm. Very poor. And we were just talking about family and history, and they heard that, and they were like, so you own slaves? And so then, like, drunkenly at parties, they would say, yeah, Brett's like, they're a racist friend from Tennessee, her family owns slaves. Just things like that.
Are you serious?
Yes. And it just got more and more heated, and I was supposed to live with this whole group of friends going into my senior year.
And this all came just because you said you weren't going to vote for Biden or Bernie.
That's it.
There's no mention of anything else.
No. I think they understood it, and then we had a conversation later, and I was like, yeah. At the time, I wasn't, like, gung-ho for Trump, but I wasn't anti him. I was just like, yeah, I'll vote for Trump. He's our president now. I think he's doing a good job. He's the Republican. What he says makes sense. I was never thrown off by any of the media hit pieces or things that he said. I was just like, hey, he's just like an abrasive guy. He's an entertainer. It was like totally normal. I was like, okay. And my mom was and I was, living at home, going to school. So we would talk about politics a lot. And she was never his biggest fan. But voted for him and really respected the fact that he was a businessman. And that made total sense. My brain was like, yeah, why would I not want somebody who has run businesses and built empires to run our country? That makes total sense. Like, it's him or these people that have been in government for 50 years and have done jack shit. Like, it just made, it was so clear in my head. Didn't even think of it being majorly controversial, especially when I knew that my friends and I had differences, and we had never, like, I respected them. I accepted that we had differences. It was just I just hadn't been faced with that yet. And then suddenly it all flipped. And then after COVID, everybody had gone home and we were in these group chats. We would be on Zoom together. We'd hang out, in that weird twilight zone of be playing like games over Zoom and have hangouts and whatever it was. Be in all these group chats. And they would, say things like, we're road tripping to the beach. And it was like June of 2020. his friends like getting out of their homes in Chicago and going to South Carolina so they could go to the beach while simultaneously shitting on Republicans, being like, yeah, we just saw like a idiot with a Trump flag on out of his car. My dad said that if we had hit him, he wouldn't have given a shit. Like that kind of stuff. And I'm like in the group chat and you're saying that to me. Like, I hope we just run over all these Trump supporters. Knowing that I was in there. And I was still just like, oh, it's fine. Like,
So it's like an indirect shot.
Yeah.
At you.
And I went along with it. I was like, oh, it's okay. Like, they still love me. We're still friends. I'm still in the group chat. We're still going to live together. And my brother, Chase, you know, I wasn't really listening to my mom. And she called him. And I was like, I think you need to talk to Brett. This is weird. And he called me and he was like, you know, those aren't friends. You're about to go live in like a tiny 2-bedroom Westwood apartment with these 4 people. And they can't even respect you for having a different opinion when you've spent the last 2.5 years not bringing anything up, not starting fights, loving them, caring for them, being supportive. That's not what friendship's about. And that's kind of when it clicked. And so I told him it had really reached a head where it was like it had gotten less indirect. And I had a conversation with like each of them individually. I was like, we're going into this election. Can I trust that we're all going to be friends after this? And it was like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, it was just very, very intense. Maybe you should live this after all. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't. And that was around the time we got, my sorority basically like turned freaking upside down during BLM, and girls were getting called out and kicked out of the sorority because they racially profiled people because there was a guy who, UCLA is a very public campus. It's not closed off. It's in the city. Sorority Row is just in a Westwood neighborhood. So anybody can walk up, and there was a couple of guys that were coming in and breaking into the sorority houses and trying to attack young women. One of them was black. And they were trying to find this guy. And so one of the girls had seen a man who was an exact description, wearing the exact hoodie, walking suspiciously around campus, and wrote in our group chat, I think I saw him, I'm going to send him to the police, and it was a black guy. And she got absolutely tarred and feathered for racially profiling.
Wow.
Like publicly in this group chat of like, I don't remember her name, Becca, whatever it was, of like, this is so disgraceful. You really need to check your privileges. She was like called in front of the board. I was watching all this transpire, like, have we lost our ever-loving minds? There's a man who's breaking into sorority houses, and that had been going on for months at this point. And the campus was like sort of shutting down, but some people still lived on campus. It was like a ghost town, and like these houses were being broken into. And this girl was absolutely like destroyed in front of everybody. And then there was all this stuff of like, well, we as like the Panhellenic Council and, Kappa Delta we have to make a BLM statement. I was like, we're a fucking UCLA sorority. And then Kappa Delta, like the head chapter, made a statement that wasn't good enough. And then that was super messy. And Amy Coney Barrett was a Kappa Delta. And so right after all the BLM stuff, when she was nominated, Kappa Delta, the head, chapter, made a statement, as they should have, saying, this is now our most, successful alum. She's going to the Supreme Court. They had to apologize for celebrating because she was anti-women's rights. It was a mess. And then the thing that I was just like, I'm done with all of this. I had just said, okay, no, I'm not going to live in this apartment. But I was like, maybe I'll stick it out in this sorority like the last year. Why not? Maybe because I kept thinking if campus reopened, it was nice to have like a place to go and study and activities to go do. And I was like, I might as well. I've already paid. And they sent out, the house manager, mom person, sent out a letter talking about the election, telling us all that she hoped we voted correctly. And that we voted for women's rights. And that we didn't forget that said there was a man in office that was going to take all of that away from us, and that she, being older than us, knew all of this and was wiser, and that she hoped that we showed up and voted correctly. I was like, I can't freaking deal with this. I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
So then that was at the end of 2020, like going into the fall semester. So I basically just disconnected from everything, which honestly was like the greatest gift I could have been given. Because I think it wasn't a bad thing, but I'd gotten really engaged in UCLA life over that year and a half. Because I had gone to community college and then I transferred into UCLA as a junior. man, had joined the sorority, had gone to the football games, had gone to the parties, had met people, was going to live on campus, all of that. And COVID just pulled me out of it and recalibrated me in a lot of ways, where I had to become very intentional about my values and my principles and the people that I was surrounding myself with. I became super lonely because the world was shut down, and my family was one of the only ones that was like, yeah, sure, let's go to Yosemite. My brother's going to like fly across the country and come vacation with us. I'm going to go outside and not wear a mask. I was still working at Trader Joe's, so I was with people 24/7. I didn't get sick. I was fine. I was like, what's happening? Like, the world moves on. I was able to focus on where I wanted my career to go, because I was at that point where I was looking at the Hollywood industry, and I'd already kind of at that moment thought that maybe acting wasn't for me. Not that I didn't love it, but I hated the way that the industry operates. Where it's like I looked around at the people who I considered mentors who were older than me in the industry, and I did not like the lives that they were leading.
Why? What about it?
They had no control.
Control over what?
Their own personal lives. I mean, it was like a good friend of mine was on probably one of the most famous TV shows of the last 20 years. It was a lead role. Had to live out of state for months at a time. Husband stayed home and raised the kids, barely saw them. Kids went off to boarding school. She was not engaged. Friends of mine who were in their 30s, who I would be on TV shows with, they would, we'd work together, they'd go on and they'd, be a series regular on a Netflix show, and they'd be 30-something living in a townhome with 4 other adults because they couldn't afford their own home.
Wow.
People who didn't see their kids. And the thing is, even at a young age, I did not like the fact that every part of my being was just a tool for you to use.